Have you ever overheard a secret that could change everything? She said he won't make it past Tuesday, unless the weather ruins the plan again. Maya Williams froze mid-step. She wasn't supposed to be in the hallway yet. Her shift technically began in 20 minutes, but the house was always quieter at dawn, and she preferred to work when no one noticed her. That's when the real things happened, when people thought no one was listening. But Maya was listening now. From behind the cracked study door, she could hear Elaine Walsh's voice. Crisp, precise, and far too calm for a conversation that chilling. What struck Maya more wasn't what was said, but the language it was said in Russian. A language Elaine should not have spoken, a language Maya wasn't expected to understand, but she did. Her grandmother, a retired linguistics professor, had taught her Russian when she was 12. One day, she'd said, words might protect you better than fists ever will. Maya hadn't understood then. She did now. Wait, could this be a plot to kill her boss? Inside the study, the voices lowered, but became more deliberate. Richard always sails alone, came a male voice, thicker, foreign. That was Mark Petro. Tall, clean-shaven with a smirk that never reached his eyes. He'd been Richard's business partner for nearly 20 years. He'll go out before sunrise. Storms forecasted. We'll wait until he's past the second channel, Elaine responded, her tone dry like sandpaper. Maya's stomach dropped. They were talking about her boss, Richard Walsh. Tech billionaire, admired philanthropist, distant but polite. The kind of man who said thank you even when handing you a dirty cup. He was also Elaine's husband. Maya's hands clenched the microfiber cloth she'd come to retrieve. She told herself to back away, to move silently down the corridor like she'd heard nothing, like a proper maid. Instead, she stepped closer. They'll think it was the storm, Mark said. You grieve. We announce a restructuring. I'll handle the board. You get the estate and the company, Elaine added. Silence, then the sound of liquid being poured, probably from the crystal decanter Richard kept locked up until special occasions. Apparently, this was one of them. Maya's heart thundered in her chest. She knew these people. She dusted their trophies, pressed their linens, memorized their footsteps without trying. She had seen them smile at charity events, hold hands at holiday galas, and now this. A sudden creak echoed under her foot. Silence behind the door. Maya vanished into the laundry hallway before they could check. By the time the sun pierced through the sheer curtains of the kitchen windows, Maya had already scrubbed the backsplash twice, more for something to do than because it needed cleaning. Her mind wouldn't stop. Tell him. Tell Richard. No, they'll never believe you. You're just the help. You heard enough. You know what they're planning. Will Maya dare to speak up about what she just heard? Or will she simply keep her head down and finish her cleaning duties as usual? But before we dive deeper into this story, tell me, where are you watching from? And don't forget to like and subscribe so tomorrow you won't miss the next powerful video made just for you by BUP Stories. The kitchen TV hummed faintly with morning news. A hurricane warning had been issued along the Florida Keys. Maya stared at the screen, jaw tightening. That's where Richard was supposed to be heading on Tuesday. A solo sailing trip, one he took every fall like clockwork. Clears my head, he'd once mumbled while grabbing coffee before a board meeting. Maya had ironed the jacket he wore that day. She knew his schedule better than his assistant did. And now she knew something else. If she did nothing, Richard Walsh would be dead within 72 hours. Later that afternoon, she passed Richard in the hallway. He looked exhausted, shirt sleeves rolled, tie slightly loosened, glasses balanced on his nose. A man carrying 10 years more stress than he should have. He paused when he saw her. Maya, right? She nodded quickly, hands behind her back. Yes, sir. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to place something, then nodded, muttered a thanks for the fresh towels, and walked off toward his office. That was it. No window, no opportunity, just a closed door behind which someone was already planning how to close his life. Maya didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat on the corner of her twin bed in the servant quarters, her grandmother's old Russian dictionary on her lap, and a pocket recorder in hand. It was an old one. She'd bought it at a Goodwill store years ago, thinking she might use it to record bird sounds. Now, she would use it to record conspiracies. She crept down the service stairwell at 1:37 a.m., as she'd done 100 times to clean. This time she hid the recorder beneath a planter near the study angled perfectly toward the inner wall. She prayed they'd speak again and in Russian. The next morning Maya served coffee with a smile and no one noticed the shadow in her eyes. Elaine didn't make eye contact. Mark was gone. Richard was in meetings. She wanted to scream, but instead she pressed a note beneath Richard's espresso cup. Just one sentence written in tight cursive. Don't board the yacht Tuesday. Danger waits at sea. Someone who sees. She left it there, then walked out before her courage could waver. That evening, news broke of an incident at sea. A private yacht had capsized off the coast of Key West. No bodies found yet. Initial reports suggested the victim was Richard Walsh. Elaine sobbed publicly in the grand sitting room. But Maya sat in the laundry room frozen, staring at her phone. It buzzed. Unknown number. You sent the note. She replied, yes. A moment later, another message. Thank you. I'm safe. We need to talk. Maya dropped the phone. The storm hadn't taken him, but something else was about to begin. The morning after the news broke, the Walsh estate fell into a strange manufactured mourning. Elaine wore all black. The staff were instructed to keep the blinds drawn and the music off. Fresh lilies were ordered, white, of course, and displayed in oversized glass vases along the entrance hallway. But Richard Walsh wasn't dead, and only Maya Williams knew it. She had barely slept. Somewhere between relief and dread, her body refused to rest. She played the recorded Russian conversation over and over in her mind. Even without the tape, she remembered every syllable. Elaine's voice, Mark's smug laughter, and the words, if he dies offshore, no one asks questions. The ocean does the burying. Maya stood in the laundry room that morning, folding monogrammed bedsheets like they were letters from God. Her hands moved, but her mind raced. Richard had replied to her note the night before. He was alive, hidden, watching. What now? She had crossed the line, no longer invisible, no longer just the maid. By mid-morning, Elaine entered the kitchen in satin slippers and oversized sunglasses. Take the garbage out through the side, she said without looking at anyone. I don't want cameras picking up staff in the background. Maya nodded wordlessly. She noticed the woman's perfectly applied lipstick, not a smudge out of place, not a hint of swollen eyes. For a grieving widow, she looked ready for Vogue. Later that day, Maya slipped into Richard's office. It was quiet, the same study where she'd overheard the first conversation. The air still smelled faintly of cedar and expensive paper. She walked slowly toward the center desk, her fingers brushing across the brass lamp. Her hand paused above the desk drawer. She opened it. Inside was a leather-bound folder. Inside the folder, documents, real estate contracts, share restructuring plans. One page stuck out. It was signed by Elaine. Maya scanned it, her heart thudding. The paper was requesting the transfer of 47% of Richard's holdings in Walsh Biomed to a new offshore trust, a trust bearing Mark Petrov's name. She didn't hear the door until it clicked shut behind her. Elaine's voice followed like a cold gust. Looking for something? Maya turned slowly. I was just dusting, she said, holding the cloth up. There was a smudge on the lamp. Elaine's eyes narrowed. We have a cleaning schedule. You're not on this floor today. Maya dipped her head slightly. I'll remember next time, ma'am. There was a long silence. Then Elaine stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the wood floor. You've been here what, 9 months? Yes, ma'am. You keep to yourself. That's good. Her smile was practiced like a painting. But know this, quiet people still make noise in the wrong places. Maya said nothing. She didn't blink. And for a moment, just a flicker, Elaine's smile faltered. That night, Maya tucked herself into the corner of her twin bed again and opened the small safe she had kept under her luggage. Inside were only 3 things: her grandmother's Russian English notebook, a small flash drive, and a faded envelope that read, "If anything happens to me, give this to someone who still believes in good." She hadn't opened it in 5 years, but tonight it sat beside her pillow. She inserted the flash drive into her old Chromebook and listened again. This time she took notes. She wrote timestamps, words, tones, pauses, laughter. The way Elaine said, "No one will question a widow." Maya didn't cry. She translated and she understood what needed to be done. The next day, she slipped another envelope beneath Richard's second office door at their downtown headquarters. It contained a translation, the full transcript of the Russian conversation. A short handwritten note accompanied it. "She's moving fast. You should too, M.W." 3 hours later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Where did you learn Russian?" She stared at the screen, then typed, "My grandmother taught me." She said, "Words save lives." A pause. Then, "We need to talk discreetly." That night, she met him in the greenhouse. Richard stood under a row of fig trees, dressed in black, face calm, but shadowed. He didn't smile when she entered. He only nodded. "I thought you were loyal to her," he said softly. Maya didn't flinch. "I was loyal to truth, not masks." He studied her. "Why now?" Maya's eyes met his. "Because you were worth saving." Silence stretched between them. And then Richard pulled out a folder of his own. "I checked the trust. The one you highlighted. It's real. Mark and Elaine have been moving assets for nearly 6 months." Maya nodded slowly. "She was going to kill you at sea. He was going to make it look like a maritime accident. You were supposed to vanish. And instead, I canceled the trip," he said. "Because of a note under my coffee." A bitter smile tugged at his lips. He looked at her again, this time differently, like she mattered. "Why risk this?" he asked finally. Her answer was soft. "Because no one else would have warned you. Tell him. Tell Richard." Back in her room that night, Maya locked the door, shut the blinds, and exhaled for the first time in 2 days. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She had stepped out of the shadows. And from now on, every breath Elaine Walsh took would be recorded. At precisely 6:45 a.m., the ocean should have taken him. The sky over Key West was gray that morning. The tide restless. The news anchors had predicted strong winds, high waves, and scattered thunderstorms. Not unusual for late October. It was the perfect setting for a disappearance. And Richard Walsh was supposed to be part of that forecast, but he wasn't. Instead, he stood alone in his downtown Austin office, staring out the window at the empty street below, his morning coffee untouched. Behind him, a duffel bag sat unopened on the leather couch, sailing gear folded neatly inside, still packed. His phone buzzed once, then again. News alert. Private yacht believed to have capsized off Florida coast. Billionaire possibly aboard. He didn't react. He simply took a deep breath and closed the blinds. 2 floors below, Maya Williams sat in the break room with a lukewarm cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her uniform was crisp, her hands still, but inside every nerve was on fire. The news was spreading fast. Some articles had already begun calling Richard presumed dead. Others reported that Elaine Walsh was deeply devastated and had requested privacy in this difficult time. Maya nearly laughed out loud when she read that part. Elaine had spent the last 24 hours rehearsing her grief. She cried exactly twice, both times in front of cameras. The rest of the time she was on the phone with attorneys. By mid-afternoon, a press conference was scheduled in front of the Walsh estate. Elaine stood at the podium, sunglasses shielding her eyes from both the sun and the truth. "I've lost the love of my life," she said, voice breaking in all the right places. Richard was more than a husband. He was a visionary. And if the ocean truly took him, I pray it took him peacefully. Beside her stood Mark Petro, tall, somber, hands folded in front of him like a mourning brother. Maya watched the live stream on her phone in the supply closet, heart pounding. The lie was flawless, but so was the trap. That evening, Richard appeared at a federal office in Washington, D.C., escorted by his legal advisor and 2 FBI agents. No press, no announcement. He didn't want revenge. Not yet. He wanted facts. And so began the quiet investigation. Back in Austin, Elaine returned home, her voice, her gait slower, her commands to the staff sharper than ever. "Where's Maya?" she snapped, stepping into the kitchen. "In the laundry room, ma'am," one of the junior staff replied. Elaine marched straight there and found Maya folding napkins with the same unbothered calm as always. "You were off today," Elaine said. "I swapped with Denise," Maya replied evenly. Elaine studied her. "Funny, you always show up when things go wrong." Maya smiled faintly. "I guess I clean up better when there's a mess." The stare between them lasted too long. Then Elaine left, but Maya didn't stop folding. The next morning, Maya received a short message slipped under her door from R. "We're moving. Don't trust anyone. More soon." Her breath caught. She stared at the note, then at her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser. She didn't look like a hero. She looked like a housemaid. But the mirror didn't lie. Behind the cotton apron and simple bun was a woman who had already saved a life and who wasn't done yet. Meanwhile, Richard began examining his own house of cards. His company's recent share movements didn't add up. Maya's translated transcript aligned with internal discrepancies. Elaine's name was attached to financial authorizations that bypassed his knowledge. And Mark had already flown to the Cayman Islands and back 3 times in the last 2 months. There was a paper trail, one that Maya had unwittingly triggered. And now Richard followed with cold precision. 3 nights later, they met again in the greenhouse. Same time, no lights. "I'm officially dead," Richard said quietly. Maya blinked. "What?" "The media believes I died in that boat. The FBI is backing the narrative for now. It gives us time to do what? To see what they do next. When they think I'm gone." Maya looked at him. Really looked. This man wasn't grieving. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't broken. He was sharpening. She lowered her voice. "Elaine filed a petition today for emergency transfer of board control. Said the company can't afford delays." Richard nodded slowly. "I expected that. She's meeting Mark tomorrow at the Chapman Hotel, room 1406. Richard's jaw clenched. "You sure?" She said it out loud. "Thought I wasn't in the room. I was vacuuming." He almost smiled. "You were always there," he said. "And I never saw it." "That's why I was useful," Maya replied, "until now." The next day came quietly. Too quietly. Elaine left the estate around noon in a black SUV with tinted windows. No flowers, no makeup, no more pretending. Maya watched her from the upstairs window, gripping the curtain with trembling fingers. Then she picked up the landline. She dialed the secure number Richard had given her. "It's time," she said. Across town, Richard closed his laptop and stood. His eyes were still, his voice calm. He wasn't dead. But someone's empire was about to be. Elaine Walsh lit a cigarette on the hotel balcony and exhaled like she hadn't done it in years. She never smoked at home, never let Richard see the cracks. But here in room 1406 of the Chapman Hotel, the performance was over. Mark Petro sat shirtless at the end of the king-sized bed, sipping bourbon straight from the glass. "They bought it," he said. Elaine nodded, watching the traffic lights shift patterns below. "Everyone did." "No," he corrected, glancing up. "Not everyone. The maid, Maya, she's been too present." Elaine waved her hand. "She's a nobody. Quiet type. She scrubs baseboards and irons with hospital precision. She doesn't even own a cell phone. Mark shrugged. Those are the ones you should fear. Maya Williams sat across from two federal agents in a quiet office 3 blocks from the Walsh estate. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She wasn't carrying a tray. She was here because Richard had trusted her. And now the FBI needed her. Special Agent Dana Morales placed a recorder on the table. Let's go over it again. You overheard the conversation in Russian. When? Maya kept her voice steady. Last Tuesday around 6:40 a.m. You're sure it was about a planned accident? Maya reached into her tote bag and placed the flash drive on the table. I translated everything. I also included timestamps, voice matches, and how they referred to Richard by nickname only Mark uses. Richie boy. Morales raised an eyebrow. You're a maid with linguistics certification. My grandmother was a professor. I never got to finish college, Maya replied. But I never stopped learning. Agent Morales glanced at her partner. We're going to verify this, but if it checks out, this becomes a federal conspiracy case. Maya nodded. She already knew it would check out. Later that day, Richard sat in a secure location, watching the recorded live stream of Elaine and Mark together at the hotel. She laughed. He poured her more wine. They looked like lovers, co-conspirators, owners of a victory not yet claimed. He didn't flinch. He simply reached for a folder. Inside, offshore bank logs, wire transfers in Mark's name, countersigned by Elaine. Dozens of them, small at first, then bolder, and they all started 6 months ago. Around the time she began urging him to update his will. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Elaine returned from her hotel rendezvous. Her mood was calm, almost glowing. She called the entire household staff for a meeting in the living room. Maya stood in the back, hands folded. Elaine clasped her hands dramatically. In light of recent events, she began. I'll be taking a more active role in the household. Several maids exchanged glances. You will follow a new schedule. I expect tighter security, fewer personal calls, no unnecessary movement in the East Wing. She turned to Maya. And you? I want your room moved to the basement closer to the laundry system. Maya nodded silently. She didn't flinch. She'd already copied everything important. That night, Maya received a second note. This one hand-delivered by a teenager in a bike helmet who only said, "You're supposed to read this alone." She waited until everyone had gone to bed. Inside the note, Richard's handwriting. Elaine's filing new board papers. She wants controlling interest. I need you to delay her. Stall, distract, just until Friday. Maya reread the final line twice. If she suspects we're watching her, she'll vanish and I won't catch her next time. The next morning, Maya brewed Elaine's coffee a little weaker than usual and left a small water stain on one of her designer scarves. It was intentional. Elaine's reaction was volcanic. This is silk, you idiot. Maya lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll pay for it. Elaine rolled her eyes. With what? Your lunch money. She stormed out, but not before adding, and don't step foot upstairs unless I send for you. Maya didn't need to. She'd already placed a second flash drive in the closet vent 2 nights ago. Back in town, Agent Morales called Richard. Petrov's offshore accounts are active, Cayman Islands. Swiss routing numbers. We have enough for a quiet freeze, but we need more from Elaine. Richard's voice was cool. Give her room. She'll hang herself. By Thursday, Elaine had called an emergency meeting with the company's legal board. She arrived in a charcoal pantsuit, veil still delicately pinned in her hair for dramatic effect. We need to transfer operational control to me, she said flatly. Richard's absence is hurting morale. The board must act. A young board member asked gently, don't we need official proof of death? Elaine's voice dropped. That's coming. The Coast Guard just issued the final missing persons declaration. It's a formality now.
But halfway through the meeting, her phone buzzed.
Unknown number. Text only. 2 words. He knows. Elaine's hand shook for the first time in days. Back at the estate, Maya washed dishes with deliberate care. The sunlight warmed the tile beneath her bare feet. She hummed softly an old jazz melody her grandmother used to play during Sunday cleaning. From the living room came the sound of a shattered glass. Elaine's voice rose sharp and panicked. Then silence. Maya smiled slightly and kept scrubbing. The storm hadn't come at sea, but it was finally landing at home. It was the kind of morning that looked too perfect. Golden light spilled over the Walsh estate like melted honey. Sparrows fluttered along the iron fence. The marble floors gleamed as if nothing had ever gone wrong there, but wrong things often hide in beautiful places. Maya Williams stood near the doorway of the home office, holding a tray of coffee and a small envelope tucked discreetly between the napkins. Her heart pounded under her pressed uniform. She'd heard it last night, Elaine on the phone, whispering furiously behind the half-closed guest room door. Everything is ready. The notary comes at 10 o'clock. All Richard's shares, once signed, will transfer legally. No delays. Maya didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Now it was 9:54 a.m. She stepped into the office and placed the tray down. Your coffee, ma'am, she said calmly and with a soft bow turned away. Elaine didn't respond. She was too focused on the legal packet in front of her, 40 pages thick, clipped in neat sections. The last page bore a signature line, Richard A. Walsh, with a posthumous executive clause. Maya retreated to the hallway and watched from the shadows. 5 minutes later, the notary arrived. A woman in her 60s, polite and no-nonsense, carrying a black zippered folder. Elaine greeted her with rehearsed grief. I'm still adjusting, but business must move forward. I understand, the notary replied kindly. We'll get through it quickly. They entered the office and shut the door. Maya waited, counted the seconds. 1:26, then she made her move. She knocked. A soft, respectful tap. Elaine's voice came, clipped. What? I think the dog got into the pantry. Ma'am, you might want to check the security footage. Something's been knocked over. Elaine groaned. Not now, Maya. I understand. I just thought it was urgent. The notary looked up from her folder. Do you need a moment, Mrs. Walsh? Elaine hesitated, then cursed softly and stood. 2 minutes, she muttered, stepping out past Maya, heels clacking angrily down the hall. The office door clicked behind her. Maya was already inside. She stepped to the desk. The signature page lay face up, a silver pen resting beside it. She didn't touch it. Instead, she reached into her apron and slid a folded yellow paper onto the notary's folder. It read, "Do not validate this signature. Mr. Walsh is alive. This is fraud." The notary blinked, reading quickly. She looked up, meeting Maya's eyes. Maya whispered, "He's alive. He'll contact you today." A heartbeat. Then another. The notary slowly closed her folder and slid the pen away. Understood. 10 minutes later, Elaine returned. What happened? The notary smiled politely. Apologies, Mrs. Walsh. I've just received an urgent alert about a procedural issue. I'm afraid I need to verify something with the probate court before proceeding. Elaine's eyes narrowed. But you said, I understand, ma'am, but I'm required to follow proper legal channels. I'll reschedule by Monday. It shouldn't be long. Elaine tried to mask her fury. Of course. She watched the notary leave, hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her sleeve. When she turned to Maya, her eyes were sharp as razors. What did you say to her? Maya blinked, innocent. Just that the pantry shelf fell. She offered to wait, but I told her I could handle it. Elaine studied her. You're lying. I'm cleaning, ma'am. Elaine stepped closer. You know what happens to people who cross me. Maya didn't move. Yes.
A long silence passed between them.
Then Elaine turned and stormed away. That evening, Maya received a call from an unknown number. Williams came. Agent Morales's voice firm. Whatever you did today worked. We've delayed the transfer. And Mr. Walsh just delivered the second account folder. It's worse than we thought. How bad? Shell companies, redirected funds, bribes to offshore regulators, and falsified death documents for him. Pre-signed and dated. Maya's jaw tightened.
They were planning this for months, years, Morales said.
But now we have enough to freeze movement. The next 72 hours are crucial. Keep your position. Don't get caught.
At midnight, Maya sat on the windowsill in her room, staring out at the garden.
The wind had picked up. Tree branches scratched the glass like whispers.
She reached under her mattress and pulled out the faded envelope marked in cursive.
If anything happens to me, she opened it for the first time. Inside, a single page, her grandmother's handwriting. One day you will stand in a place no one expects you to stand.
Speak quietly, move softly, but never shrink from the truth.
You come from women who watched storms and never ran. Be the storm that doesn't shout. Maya folded the note and tucked it into her apron. Tomorrow she wouldn't clean.
Tomorrow she would follow Elaine because the real war had just begun.
At exactly 8:12 a.m., Richard Walsh walked into the Crestview Private Archives building under the name Michael Blake.
He wore jeans, a navy windbreaker, and a baseball cap that shadowed his face.
No one recognized him. No one looked twice. That's how he wanted it.
The truth, after all, wasn't something you screamed. It was something you gathered quietly, meticulously, like a man picking up the shattered pieces of his own legacy. Inside, a private room waited for him, set up through his attorney, and cleared through an agent inside the FBI. What sat on the mahogany table were years' worth of financial reports, security footage, and digital forensics, all tied to Mark Petro and to Elaine. Meanwhile, at the Walsh estate, Maya Williams watched Elaine float through the house in a silk robe, humming softly, sipping from a crystal glass filled with something too amber to be juice.
Elaine was relaxed. Too relaxed.
She'd assumed the paperwork would go through, that the company board would rubber stamp her control, that no one would ever question her grief. But she hadn't seen Richard's hands moving behind the curtain, and she hadn't seen Maya watching. By noon, Richard had finished reviewing the documents. What he saw wasn't just betrayal. It was an engineered collapse. Over $3.2 million funneled into offshore consulting firms listed under Mark's extended family. A falsified insurance policy valuing Richard's death at over $15 million. Payout directed to a trust Elaine controlled. Internal memos from board members pressured to vote on control shifts under pretense of Richard's failing health and a timeline. It all began a week after his last major surgery. While he recovered, they planned. At 2:47 p.m., Maya received a text from an encrypted app. Today, 4 p.m. Chapman Hotel, room 603. Cameras are on. Archie read it twice, then grabbed her coat.
At 3:50 p.m., Elaine arrived at the Chapman Hotel. Sunglasses hiding her eyes, blazer tailored to perfection. Mark was already there. 2 drinks on the table, no ice. "It's done?" he asked as she closed the door. Elaine smirked. "By tomorrow, the board is mine." Mark clinked his glass to widowhood. Elaine didn't laugh, she sipped.
"I want Maya out," she said coldly.
"She's watching me. I can feel it." "You want me to handle it?" "Not yet."
"But if she steps out of line again?"
Mark nodded.
Neither of them knew the room was wired.
In a dark surveillance van across the street, Richard sat beside Agent Morales and an FBI tech team.
He watched his wife raise a toast with his best friend, watched the 2 people he trusted most celebrate his death. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He simply hit record. Back at the estate, Maya moved through the rooms like usual, polishing, straightening, observing.
When Elaine returned at dusk, Maya offered her the usual smile. "Dinner's ready, ma'am." Elaine glanced at her. "You're very punctual." "I try to be." Elaine's tone shifted. "Tell me something, Maya. Have you ever had a job that felt bigger than you?" Maya held her gaze. "I think I'm in one now." Elaine paused just for a second, then smiled cold and soft. "Well, don't disappoint me." That night, Richard called. Maya answered on the first ring. "It's done," he said. "Everything we need is on tape." "What happens now?" "We wait 48 hours. Then it goes to the Attorney General's office. Then the world sees who they really are." Maya was silent for a moment. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. Richard exhaled. "I'm not sure. But I know what I have to do." "And me?" "You're the reason I'm still here," he said. "Just stay close." She nodded even though he couldn't see it. Later that night, Maya stood alone in the kitchen, the light above the stove flickering slightly. She opened her grandmother's envelope again. The same words stared back. "Speak quietly. Move softly, but never shrink from the truth." She folded it once more, tucked it in her pocket, and whispered, "I'm not shrinking." Room 1406 was warmer than it should have been. Elaine Walsh paced near the minibar, barefoot in a white satin robe, her freshly painted nails clinking lightly against the glass of red wine. She swirled absent-mindedly. The curtains were half drawn. The city lights of Austin blinked beyond the glass, calm and oblivious. Mark Petro lounged on the couch in a dark undershirt, scrolling his phone with practiced boredom. "You hear from the lawyer yet?" he asked without looking up. Elaine sipped. "Tomorrow morning, once the transfer is complete, I'm selling off 15%. I want my name off the books before the heat starts." Mark nodded, still scrolling. "Smart." There was a knock at the door. 3 firm taps. Elaine stiffened slightly. "Room service." Mark shrugged. She opened the door and froze. Richard Walsh stood in the hallway. Alive, wearing a dark overcoat, his hair slightly longer, a half shadow of stubble on his jaw. No security, no fanfare, just him. Elaine's wineglass trembled. Mark jumped to his feet. "What the hell?" "Don't," Richard said quietly, stepping inside. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a gunshot. No one moved. No one breathed. Elaine backed up 2 steps, then stopped, eyes darting to the table. "You're supposed to be dead," Richard offered, voice calm. "I know that was the idea." Mark raised both hands slightly. "Rich, listen." Richard looked at him dead in the eye. "No, you listen." He reached into his coat, pulled out a small audio recorder, and hit play. Their voices filled the room instantly. "Elaine, once he's past the second channel, it's done." "Mark." "They'll think it was the storm. No one questions a widow." Elaine dropped her glass. It shattered at her feet. Mark's face went pale. "I have 3 hours of this," Richard said, his voice like iron wrapped in velvet. "Every meeting, every whisper, every plan." Elaine took a slow step backward. You bugged us." Richard stepped closer. "No, you made it easy. All I had to do was listen." Mark's voice cracked. "We were going to stop. You were pulling away. You were making bad decisions. Stop." Richard said again, sharper this time. He turned to Elaine. "You married me for money. I know that now. But I didn't realize you tried to erase me to get all of it." Elaine's voice was thin. "You were never there. Not really. You loved your boardroom more than you loved me, and you loved my account more than you loved the truth." Richard stepped back and looked at them both. Mark now sat slumped on the edge of the couch, head in hands. Elaine stood motionless, mascara beginning to smudge beneath her eyes. You think this ends with me confronting you? Richard asked. No. The FBI already has everything. This is a courtesy. Elaine blinked. A what? A warning, he said. Because when they come, and they will, I won't be here to explain. Mark stood. You can't do this. We built that company together. You didn't build it, Richard said coldly. You drained it quietly, like a thief in designer suits. Elaine opened her mouth. Don't lie, he said. Not here. Silence long and thick. Then Richard turned. He walked to the door, hand on the handle. Before stepping out, he looked over his shoulder one last time. I hope it was worth it. And then he left. Outside room 1406, the hallway was quiet, carpeted still. Richard exhaled, a deep, painful release of something heavy he hadn't realized he'd been holding in for months. He stepped into the elevator, pressed G, and didn't look back. 30 minutes later, Richard sat in the FBI field office across town. Agent Morales placed a final signature sheet in front of him. It's done. Warrants are live. Surveillance confirms enough for obstruction, conspiracy, fraud, and attempted manslaughter. Richard nodded. Let them have the last toast. Morales tilted her head. You okay? He hesitated, then said quietly. I don't think I've ever been okay until now. At the Walsh estate, Maya Williams stood in the library, wiping dust from the mantel for the third time that day. She didn't hear the news first. She felt it. The silence. The way the tension in the house shifted like something dark had finally been pulled from the walls. And then the alert came through her phone. Elaine Walsh arrested in connection to financial conspiracy and attempted homicide of billionaire husband. More updates coming. Maya closed the phone and stared out the window. The garden lights flickered on. Wind brushed against the glass. She didn't smile. She just breathed. At 11:27 p.m., a knock came at her door. She opened it. Richard stood there. No words, just eyes that had seen too much. And now, finally, just enough. You saved me, he said. Maya shook her head gently. I just listened. He reached out, took her hand for a moment. Warm human. I'll never forget it, he said. I hope you don't, Maya replied softly. Because people like me, we don't usually get remembered. You will, Richard said. I'll make sure of it. The sound of a pen scratching across paper should not be that satisfying. But for Richard Walsh, sitting alone in his study 3 days after Elaine's arrest, it was the only thing that made sense. The ink flowed smoothly, confidently, like the storm had passed and left something steadier behind. Before him lay 2 documents. One was the finalized divorce decree signed by both parties. Elaine's signature had come through her attorney. No apology, no note, just ink. The other was a legal motion to permanently dissolve Mark Petrov's shares in Walsh Biomed and freeze all pending payments to his Cayman accounts. This signature felt heavier. Richard took a long breath then signed. At the same hour, Maya Williams was upstairs folding her final stack of towels. Her room had already been cleared. A single canvas duffel bag sat on the edge of the bed. The bookshelf was empty. The photograph of her grandmother had been carefully wrapped in a dish towel and tucked into the side pocket. She was leaving, not because she was dismissed, not because she had to, but because she was finished. Earlier that morning, she had stood in front of the bedroom mirror adjusting the buttons of her uniform one last time. She wasn't sure why she wore it today. Maybe to remind herself of where she started. Maybe to remind Richard. Downstairs, the estate was quiet, eerily so. No barked commands, no heavy perfume trailing through the hallway, no sharply clacking heels across polished stone, just silence. And in that silence, peace. At 10:06 a.m., Maya walked into the study. Richard looked up from his desk. His posture was straighter, his eyes clearer. There were dark circles beneath them still, but they belonged to a man healing, not hiding. You're really leaving? He asked. Maya nodded. I was never meant to stay. Richard leaned back. You have no idea how many people have asked to stay since this all started. Advisors, investors, reporters, even family. I'm not them. No, he said, you're not. He stood and walked over, holding out a white envelope. This is for you. A personal gift. No strings. Maya didn't take it. Instead, she asked, What is it you think I want? Richard paused. I think you want to disappear before the cameras show up. She gave a small smile. I've been disappearing my whole life. There was a beat of silence. Then Richard stepped back, looked at her with something close to reverence. Then take whatever you need to never have to do it again. This time she accepted the envelope, but not the offer to stay. Outside, the sun was rising higher, casting gold along the estate driveway as Maya stepped out with her bag over one shoulder. The same driver who had once ignored her now opened the car door gently. No more detours, she joked softly. He smiled. Not today, ma'am. At the courthouse, Elaine Walsh sat behind tinted glass and waited for the judge to enter. She wore a gray suit this time. No veil, no jewelry, no husband. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't speak. But when the audio tapes were played, her left eye twitched just once. Beside her, Mark Petrov said nothing. His face looked like stone that had finally cracked in the rain. No plea was entered yet. But the room knew. Everyone did. Justice at last had found its footing. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of a small downtown diner, Maya sat alone, stirring her coffee with a wooden stick. The news played low on a TV above the counter. Breaking. Tech billionaire Richard Walsh clears his name, exposes massive fraud. Wife and partner to face federal trial. A waitress refilled her cup. Wild stuff, huh? Maya nodded. Very. You work in the industry? Maya smiled slightly. Something like that. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. That afternoon, back at the estate, Richard stood in the guest room Maya had once occupied, clean, empty, but the bed was made. A small note sat on the pillow, folded once. He opened it carefully. If you ever forget how this ended, remember how it started. You listened and you lived. Trust slowly. Love carefully. Watch everyone. M.W. Richard read it twice. Then folded it and slipped it into his wallet behind his ID. He stood for a while in the empty room, the breeze from the window rustling the curtains gently, and for the first time in years, he felt like the house could breathe again. A year later, the Walsh estate didn't look the same. The marble was still polished. The light still glowed at dusk. The garden still bloomed with curated perfection. But something had shifted. Something invisible yet undeniable. Peace. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind earned only after surviving a war fought in silence. Richard Walsh stood on the back porch, sleeves rolled up, holding a mug of black coffee. His hair was a little grayer now, his jaw firmer, his steps slower, but more certain. The trial had ended 6 weeks ago. Elaine was sentenced to 22 years without parole. Mark received 17 plus restitution. Their names were no longer whispered on Wall Street, only reported in legal digests and cautionary podcasts. Walsh Biomed had survived the scandal, just barely. And Richard had rebuilt from the inside out. He'd replaced the entire board, scrubbed the books, donated a third of his personal assets to a foundation that offered scholarships to working-class daughters of immigrant families. He called it MW Initiative. Few knew what the initials meant. Fewer needed to. Maya Williams was hundreds of miles away. She now lived in Savannah, Georgia, in a modest 2-story home with creaky wood floors, a lemon tree in the backyard, and a mailbox that still bore the name of the couple who lived there before her. She hadn't changed it yet. She liked how anonymous it felt. Every morning, she brewed coffee in a chipped ceramic mug and opened her grandmother's old notebook. She didn't read it. she didn't have to. She just liked the way it smelled. Old ink, paper, memory. There were days she still heard Elaine's voice in her sleep. Other nights it was Richard's. You saved me. I just listened. But in the daylight there was calm. And in that calm, Maya had found something she'd never been offered before. Choice. One Sunday afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. Richard standing in front of a brick schoolhouse surrounded by children holding science kits and notebooks. The sign above the entrance read for young innovators. Below the photo, a note handwritten in blue ink. You were never just the maid. R.W. Maya folded the photo carefully and slipped it between the pages of her grandmother's notebook. No tears, just breathe. Later that week, Maya walked through the aisles of a local community center. A woman in her late 40s sat at the front desk, red glasses low on her nose. You here for the ESL tutoring? No, Maya said gently. Actually, I'm here to help teach it. The woman looked up. You speak Russian? Maya smiled. Among others. The woman raised an eyebrow. You got a resume? Maya reached into her coat, pulled out a folded paper, then paused. Instead, she said, just one sentence. Go ahead. I know how to hear what people aren't saying, and I know when to speak before it's too late. The woman stared at her, then smiled slowly. You're hired. Across town, a black sedan pulled up to a duplex with peeling paint and silence hanging in the air. A young woman, barefoot, clutching a phone, opened the door. Her face was swollen from crying. The man who answered the door was tired, angry, distant. They had been fighting for days about trust, about someone at his office, about a mistake neither wanted to admit. At the gate, Maya stepped out of the car. She wore a plain navy dress, her hair in a tight bun, and no jewelry, just a clipboard. The woman at the door frowned. Are you the therapist? No, Maya said. I'm the housekeeper. The man blinked. We didn't call anyone. I wasn't sent by you, she replied. But I was sent. The woman hesitated, then slowly stepped aside. Maya entered. Inside that home, there would be shouting. There would be resistance. There would be truth that nobody wanted to face. But Maya had seen it all before. She would clean quietly, watch quietly, and when the time came, she would speak. Because lies don't fear noise. They fear someone who listens. And when Maya Williams entered a house, the truth eventually stood up, whether it wanted to or not.